The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
We are at the interview part of the show. So joining us, we have an author, of course, and the book is called The Price of Safety, and the author is Michael C. Bland. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me on.
So, Mr. Bland, The Price of Safety. So this is your first book. How did you get into this profession of writing books?
I've always been drawn to stories and to entertaining, and it's just been something that it's really interesting. It kind of becomes a calling after a while, especially once, at least for myself personally, once I get a story in my head, the darn thing will not shut up until I write it down. So I came up with this idea, and it really took me, and I was kind of inspired by when I lived in Chicago and taking the L, and everyone, of course, is on their cell phone. And I'm like, I can walk around naked. Not that anyone wants to see that, but I can walk around naked, and no one would be, everyone would be oblivious. But at the same time, there are cameras on the ceiling, so someone could always be watching. So it was that interplay and that conflict that really kind of spurred the idea for the story.
Well, it's interesting. So now this is kind of a sci-fi in the future, 2047.
Correct.
So how did you get this idea? Like you said, it just comes to your mind. Okay, so the basic idea of you see everything, we're all on camera. There's a lot of things being watched. But how do you get into the details of the story, and how does this evolve?
The story really did evolve over time. But when I started to get this idea, I really wanted to focus on a main character and his family, and the reason is because if you have this constant watching and taking where we are right now in terms of technology and that whole thing, and fast forwarding 30 years, what's it going to be like? And the way I kind of thought about it is, where were we 30 years ago? I mean, almost no one had cell phones. If so, there were those ugly brick things. The internet was just barely starting. I think beepers were more prevalent than a cell phone. And look where we've come in 30 years to where now on this little device that's about the size of a pack of cards, I can pull up anything on the internet. I can find where I am. I can find my phone, see where other people are. I can order things. I can all these things that now we take for granted. Well, then what's going to be like 30 years in the future? And then the other thought with it is technology, like anything, it's a tool. Of course, you can use it for good or ill, right? So what if in this kind of world where everything then is so advanced, what if there's a scenario where you have to try to protect someone you love in that world? And how do you do that? So that's what really drove the story.
So are you thinking that we're going to do something bad in the future because of our technology?
What I'm thinking is there is a potential for danger. So the theme of this kind of was at least just kind of a call, just what price are we paying for the technology we have? And this, I'm as guilty as everybody else. You get your iPhone or your Android, and immediately it has click here to agree to all of this legal jumble that you scroll, and who's going to really read every single line of it? And you're agreeing to allow them to do so many things and to track what you're doing and collect data and do all this stuff. And right now, that's kind of harmless. And for the most part, it's okay. You want to sell me shoes because I like to hike on the weekends. So you're going to show ads for hiking shoes. Okay, well that's harmless right now. But again, what has magnified that technology over the next 30 years? And I'm not saying that it will happen. I'm saying that, like anything, there is a chance that it could. So, and trust me, I'm not one to preach. I hate being preached to. I'm not trying to preach. All I'm doing is trying to throw a world out there that if we aren't just aware and engaged with what the technology is and what's out there and what we're giving up in exchange, it could end up in a scenario like this, in a world like this.
And also, doesn't technology in many ways often bring out the worst in people first?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And kind of like almost your basis instincts, and where, so much of the internet now, between pornography or chat boards where people are absolutely rude and ignorant in a way that you never would be on the phone, let alone in person, face to face with someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you. So how would that translate in the future?
Mm-hmm. I just wonder if, but you think that changes the whole community? I mean, because we're all basically inside, and you got people saying the nasty things to each other on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. Mm-hmm. And like you say, how they would never do that before, like in earlier times. But mm-hmm. will that change the way people interact with each other in the future? Because if you're sitting there over a period of years, and your children learn to do that from the get-go, will they not be mm-hmm. kind of different in public?
I would say that I think that people have changed already as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'm of the age I grew up in the 80s, and late 70s, early 80s, and where when I was a kid, I would really go out and play. I'd ride my bike and I'd be gone and play with other kids in the neighborhood, and until early you hear the mom's voice yelling your name. Nowadays, that doesn't happen. That's rare. I'm sure maybe in very small parts of the country, but the vast majority, kids don't do that. Instead, they do the organized sports, and they do other things, and they are more online within the TikTok and the Insta and Snapchat and all that stuff. And those things have are different ways that they communicate. I'm not saying one way is good or one way is bad, but I do think there's already a change in the way that each generation is communicating with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder too, being that you're really old.
Wait, let me take the knife out of my back. Wow, that really.
No, I was just wondering if. No, I'm even older than that. So, but how we grew up, and now mm-hmm. these advances that come along as we are older, we see the negative because we've learned how people are over the years that we've been alive. But I just wonder if a lot of that is just a paranoia that doesn't necessarily have to be. Because you look at back in the 60s when people were getting phones and color TV and all the different things that were changing then, a lot of people of the older generation thought that the world was going to hell. Rock and roll music and Woodstock and
right.
I just wonder if it's much the same.
My personal belief is that people are both bad and good, and there's going to be aspects of both. And that's one of the things that is both beautiful and amazing, yet frustrating. People can be both extremes, can be extremely generous and use social platforms to talk about between the Black Lives Matter and various causes and issues that they have, and yet the other extreme people can use it for harm, whether it's saying things that are inappropriate, stalking people online, so the whole gauntlet of it. And so I think there will be an element that will be worse, but I also think there will be an element that will still be, a basic good person, or good people.
So let's go over the basic premise of your story. So for the people that haven't read it yet, kind of give us a basic rundown.
So The Price of Safety is set in a world where, as you may have already gathered from our talking, it's in a world where technology is so prevalent that no crime goes unsolved. And in that world, the main character, Dray Quintero, his 19-year-old daughter commits a crime. So he covers it up to save her life, and that starts down this rabbit hole where he discovers that nothing is as he thought it was.
Why didn't he just let her go to jail?
Well, one
short book.
Be a very short book. And yeah, no, that's it. But this crime is, and she inadvertently does, it's actually a capital crime. So it's not just that she's going to get a slap on the wrist or have to clean up trash on the side of the highway. It actually is a capital crime.
Yeah.
So he's saving her life.
So when you have these characters, like you have Dray, and then his 19-year-old daughter, the one we're talking about, is Raven. So Raven, who do you get these two characters from? Is this people you've met in life or you've come across, or how do you draw to create these characters?
There are little elements, and I've seen a T-shirt said, "Be careful, I'll put you in my next novel," which I thought was a great T-shirt to have. So as most writers, I steal a little bits from here and there. So they are a conglomerate of different people. One of the big things with Dray, not only the story itself as his role in it, but both my grandparents were engineers. One built bombs during World War II. The other helped build battleships in New York City Harbor. And I was always proud of them and amazed by their knowledge and abilities. And so Dray is a engineer in the story, which then plays directly into the story itself because he helped actually create the web interlinking of the camera systems, because of course there are a hodgepodge of 100 different kind of camera systems in this country, and he helped connect them all together. So he helped create the world that he's now fighting against.
Now in the story,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask you real quick. In the story, the capital crimes, I'm assuming that in the future the list of capital crimes has been greatly expanded. Is that a good guess?
It has been expanded, and it's also directly related to some of the technology because they want to make sure that everybody in the country has a certain kind of technology that's a direct link. It plays a direct part in the story. It's these implants. Everyone has a very small implant that you get when you're very young, and it's connected to camera screens in your eyes. If you're familiar with like the old cataract surgery where they take out your lens and put a new lens in your eye, well, this is a fake lens that's actually a computer screen.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, that's okay. But so she inadvertently rips out, not to get graphic, but she rips out her boyfriend's implant, which is a capital crime.
Okay.
And see that, so again, it plays into the technology, but then it's what does that technology do and why is it important, and that's part of the story.
Well,
So when I wrote this, I created, it's a mystery. It's a crime that's committed, and then Dray finds himself not only in trying to help save his daughter, but finds himself he's actually in the middle of a mystery that he didn't realize.
I have those same lenses in my eyes. So they're watching me. And,
They're very convenient.
Yeah, and they put a chip in my brain. They had lots of room to put it in. Wow.
Well, it doesn't bother you.
Yeah, no, I'm used to it. So I just wonder now, so how do you develop a character in these as well? So you've got your character. So how is it that you implant? There's the word. How is it that you put these developments on the character? Like how? Because as a reader, how do I know what Raven is all about?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely developing it over time, and character and the story they go hand in hand. And as I developed it, honestly, the story itself changed, and the main character changed as I was developing the story and figuring out what story I wanted to tell and how best that worked. And with him being an engineer, it really that was almost that's like when a lot of things kind of clicked into place. For him to have a level of knowledge that the average person wouldn't have, but also then how would they react? And for me, one of the biggest things is that what drives Dray, which is his family, protecting his family. His daughters are his world, and so he does everything for them. And I thought that was important because, one, I thought that was very relatable. And something that everybody would, regardless of what cool, shiny technologies around and what kind of events are going on, that's the core of that character. And like I use the analogy of Star Wars. I love Star Wars, and there's some really cool stuff. And trust me, I'd still love to have a lightsaber any day now. But the thing is, if it wasn't for the characters, there'd be nothing just except some kind of odd movie with a big walking guy in fur and all that stuff. But so it's really characters are really important, and so I really want to make sure that this book had heart and had a main character that you could understand and root for.
Wow, that's crazy. So what are your influences on writing? Like, who do you read?
I read Pierce Brown. He did the Red Rising series, which is a fantastic series if you haven't read it. Excuse me. Also, Michael Crichton. He was a big influence as well. I love his ability to take science and technology and weave it into a story that's really interesting. And so not only is it a unique way of telling various stories, but you also kind of learn something in the process, which is, kind of cool. Too bad school wasn't always like that, right? So that was another influence for this particular book. 1984 did have a little bit of an influence as well. But then other than that, I'm just a big voracious reader. I've got Stephen King, and I've got a short story anthology and a couple of things on my nightstand right now.
Stephen King, I've never heard of him. Is he an author?
Yeah, he's new. Yeah, you should check him out.
You might know him better as Richard Bachman.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah,
There you go.
Bachman books are great.
Yeah,
Books are great.
I know that. So this is an off the cuff, but we have a lot of different types of guests, and we've had a lot of people that were, let's say, on the conspiratorial side, like we haven't been to the moon, the Earth is flat, there's underground people living, a moon base, you hear it all. Now, are you worried that you're going to get a lot of conspiratorial type followers?
Not worried. I mean, not unless they show up at my house, which might be a little freaky.
It doesn't take them long,
As long as they buy the book.
There's a map. I put a map in there, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, and we'll give out your number at the end of the show.
Well, thank you. You're very kind.
No, but do you feel a strange sense of, this is a very weird time right now, and people tend to be downplaying science, and they're more into make-believe right now. There's more of a that type of a world. Do you worry about being part of that in a sense, or does it feel weird with this going on in the world?
Definitely, there are elements of it that have given me pause, and one aspect is you're talking about the tracking software, which I understand why there's the need for it, and I personally think it's a good idea for tracking and spreading of the coronavirus and making sure that, look, if there's someone that's sick, why not try to use something that's really already there in terms of technologies, just writing actual software code for it to be able to track and make sure. And hey, by the way, you passed, you were in a room with this person, they are tested positive, you need to get tested, kind of thing. I personally think that is very smart. However, I do admit that then made me remind me almost with my book to a degree of tracking and that kind of stuff. It's almost like, is that the grandfather of what I kind of envisioned in my book? So in a way, that part is a little eerie, and it is a little concerning, but at the same time, I'm certainly not going to not write this story because of concern of how others might react. I hope in a positive way, and I hope in a way that does at least make people, one, enjoy it, and two, maybe think a little bit and where things are going. Another element of my book are drones, and then as I'm doing some research for the book, I mean, there are things that they're envisioning using drones for in wartime that I never would have thought about.
I just wonder, so do you think some of these things that you write about, or even the whole overall concept, is something that might come true?
Yes. Yeah.
Ooh.
And one of the big things I keep saying one big face, but I really wanted to make sure that this. I'm noticing that I said like 3 times now. But
people say that about me all the time.
Well, yeah, I thought so. So I wanted to make sure that the story was as plausible and as potential as possible. I've read a number of stories, and I'm sure you and your listeners have as well, and nothing against the author per se, but you're reading a story and then suddenly there's a leap. There's a jump in either the story or the rules of the story or technology or something that the character, whatever, something that suddenly just knocks you out of the story and go, no, that's not believable. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that with a passion. Right? And I definitely, because I lose the reader. And the other thing, as I was writing the actual story, it's very fast-paced because, especially more and more nowadays, talking about technology, I'm fighting for your attention. I'm fighting with the, whatever's on TV, your, Insta popping off, your Facebook covers, liking your posts, whatever text you're getting, everything else. And I have to keep your attention because if you put my book down, what are the odds you're going to pick it back up?
Isn't that one of the functions of science fiction throughout history, is to warn people about the dangers of technology? I mean, even if you look back to like Godzilla and the attack of the 50-foot woman and things like that, those sci-fi movies in the 50s were warnings about nuclear power, and then it moved on to the 70s and 80s. It became about computers and things. So it's kind of a staple of science fiction.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And so that's why that also fit well with this story.
Well, I have to say that you've got to be an optimist if you think we're still going to be around in 2047. So I'm assuming there may be an optimistic bent to your book as well.
There is, and that's at the end of the day, you're rooting for the character, but it all has to be earned. But I'm really proud of where the story went and how it ended, because I thought it was, I thought it fit exactly. When I first started planning the book, that's not where I expected it to end, but I was really proud of it.
And that's a good question. I do some writing myself too, and there's times when you plot out the story and you do it from beginning, middle, and end, and you have your characters and everything. And then once you start writing it, and especially once you start dealing with the characters who kind of take on a life of their own, if you make them as much as you can a whole person, does the story change? Do you end up changing your ending or the outcome because of the way that the story is developed as you're writing it, as opposed to a set outline?
It did change. I will admit I'm a big outliner, and I outlined this book like crazy for over a year before I wrote it. And partly to make sure that with the pacing and everything, but on a bigger level, is because making sure that the mystery and the technology that I had, again, that I didn't want to have any spot where it's unearned or where I'm suddenly taking a leap that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I don't want a reader to go, well, what if they just did that? Almost like where TV shows kind of seem to hark back to the 80s, because otherwise the main characters would just have a cell phone, just be able to call the person and no more conflict, because they would just, no, of course, Jimmy, I'm here at the store, kind of thing, instead of the main character running around, right? So with my world, where technology, you're so interconnected, had to be different. It had to be in a way that made it work. So to go back to your answer or your question, yes, the story changed many, many times. And I didn't really totally know at first where I wanted it to go in the end. I thought it was going to be just a single book, and it does have beginning, middle, and end. And the story ends. But it's the analogy I use is, like the end of The Matrix, where after Neo becomes the one and he beats the agent, and okay, great, he's now this amazing person. Well, then what?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what right? So that's kind of with this one, where it happened, the story, and it concludes, but then there was a very logical, natural, well, then what's the next step from there?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't mind me asking you, I just wanted to check on this. You were saying earlier about how you were kind of inspired to write this because you were on the train and you saw the way that people weren't paying attention; they're absorbed in their computers. And you said I could walk naked through this train. There was an old episode of MASH where Hawkeye was complaining that everybody was so absorbed in things that he could walk through the camp naked and no one would notice. That's not something that you're going to try, or is that the story that's in your book? Is that just an anecdotal thing, or from experience?
It's purely anecdotal. No.
Okay.
And my lawyer said to claim I never did.
Yeah, that's good. Good. Yeah.
But the big question, probably the most important thing that everybody's been waiting for me to ask and to get the answer. In 2047, that's when this takes place, right?
Yes.
Does the president still tweet? And is it as stupid as it is now? Like, is it just?
Hopefully, it's not the same president.
It's a funny question, but in reality, so when you've moved things ahead 30 years, so obviously things are changing fast. You know how fast we got into Twitter and Facebook and all this. As fast as it comes, it goes. So in 30 years, are they communicating with the same devices? Are they still Twittering and all this stuff, or have you developed some new sort of thing, or did you leave that out, or how do you deal with that?
So I focused this book kind of on a regional kind of area. It takes place in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and it's Dray and his world. And then, of course, sequel. He started things that it's going to then snowball from there. So some of those answers actually, not to say stay tuned, but stay tuned. You'll find out some of those in the future. But in general, in terms of the president, it is you do communicate differently, and it's a much more instantaneous, a much more intimate conversation.
Oh, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Or maybe much more private. How's that? Maybe a more private way. You don't have to be broadcasting it, so everyone knows.
Oh. Now, I wonder, I ask a lot of people this lately, is with COVID-19 and the pandemic and all this stuff going on, and I'm just wondering, so now that we've had this COVID pandemic come through in our lifetime, and this is all happening, does that affect the way you write and how you write your story coming up? Especially because, this book is done, so I guess it's sort of the way it is. Right. But if you're doing a sequel and if you're continuing the story, does it change the way you're going to write the second story?
That's a really good question. The short answer is no. And one thing that is also a little freaky with my book is, and again, 2047, I mention how previous pandemics had gone through, and I talked about the bird-related flus and the SARS-like and that kind of stuff. I mentioned that. Now that's kind of a background. It's just a hint of, or it helps add to the way the world is in 2047. So I don't go into much detail, but I'll just kind of reread it a little bit, thinking, okay, that's a little freaky that I had that in there when in fact I've already, it's now happened.
Wow.
So now, did you write the book before the COVID event, or?
Oh yeah. It actually came out just a couple months ago.
Oh, so you're like that Sally Brown. You guessed it.
I guessed it.
You should start having readings and charge people money.
I should. I need a crystal ball.
Well, you don't even need that. So now, because we won't get into the details, I think people need to read it to find out how this goes. How many are you going to do? And is this going to be a series, or are you going to write a continuation to this?
I'm currently working on the sequel right now. It's all plotted out, planned out. I know what's going to happen. I'm really excited about it. It is possibly a trilogy, but the more I'm kind of getting into it, it might end up being more than 3. But the reason why I don't know specifically the answer is I don't want to push it. I don't want it where, oh, okay, now this guy's just writing this book to putting the characters, in some ridiculous scenario. So it's until the story is told, that's how many books it'll be.
I have a question about the implications of your story. You said in the beginning that because of the technology, no crime goes unsolved. And how, you would think that at a certain point, once people realize that everybody's getting arrested for all their crimes, that the crime would dry up. So how did you envision that, and what would be the other kinds of problems involved with having a no-crime society, and at what expense did they get there?
So where I saw it is kind of what you indicated, where people would kind of stop, because if you're always going to get caught every single time before you almost make it out the door of house you're robbing or whatever, you're going to stop. Now, of course, crimes of passion are always going to happen. The ones that aren't premeditated, it happens, and those are always going to continue. Just that's the way mankind is. But then I believe as a result, there's going to be more people that are going to be struggling. That some that do turn to crime in order to survive. That they're going to then try other things, whether it's trying to hustle people, whether it's being homeless, whether it's doing menial jobs, which of course is going to be tough because in the future there's going to be more automation, so there's going to be fewer of low-paying jobs available. So there's going to be some tension there.
Because that's always the trade-off when it comes to trying to stop crime. How much of your rights are you willing to give up in exchange for living in a peaceful, crime-free society?
Right. And just because it's crime-free, that doesn't mean everyone is shiny, happy. There are no rainbows aren't everywhere.
Or peaceful, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's too bad.
Right? Yeah, utopia is just a dream, right?
Yeah. I just, now, when we get into the research of something like this, of course you have to go and find out what's possible and what's not to make it realistic. But again, how do things that are influenced, things that are changing today, and things we're going through today, does that is that going to influence your outcome even in the next book?
I'm going to try not to have a direct effect. One thing with the Black Lives Matter movement, which I completely support. One of the things is just I feel in the future that races and nationalities are just going to become more blurred. There's going to be more mixing of that, and I think that's just going to be a natural progression. And that's something I felt for a while. Again, look where we were 50 years ago versus now. There's more mixing of races, nationalities, more people living together, or on the same street that have different beliefs and different cultures and everything else. And I think that's great. I think that's going to continue.
And technology.
And technology. And interweaving, and I think also as a indirect benefit or indirect result of technology is starting to get more of that blend of cultures and attitudes, because you don't have different groups in completely different separated areas. They're all linked, and more at the touch of a button. You can, experience different things. Also, the shared experiences they become more shared as a result.
So do they actually, in 2047, do they have a national holiday for Trump?
I hope not. But, and that's the thing is, at the end of the day, the saying, the truth is stranger than fiction. Yeah. Some of the things that have occurred in the last year, if someone would have written a book, and I've had friends go, man, if I wrote, I could have better than anything I would have written in a book. And my response has been, if you wrote this as a fiction book, people would go, no, there's no way it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You have to go back to, like I was saying, where you have to have that element of belief. But some of the things that have transpired, 5 years ago, I would have laughed at you if you had said it would have happened.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the the strange thing about all of it when you're, I mean, I write in true crime and things like that. So these are things that just sort of have happened. We sort of,
Right.
you just take the evidence and write it. But when you create these stories, you're right, it has to be believable. But it's crazy with the things that are happening in the last years. It's almost like a really bad B movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like, and a couple of friends of mine have referred to it as Jumanji. Okay, we're on the phase 4 of Jumanji, and we need to go out and someone needs to win the game so we can stop this madness.
Yeah, there's something wrong. Like it would be like one of those really bad movies you'd see late at night or on Netflix wouldn't have it.
No, Netflix wouldn't even do it.
No. So it's just really strange because that opens the door, and how conspiratorial and how much people believe nowadays. It's crazy. So you just never know what's going to happen.
Agreed. Yeah, and it gets to the point where if on the news, like, hey, this new thing, breaking news. Really? Is it going to be at the same level as the rest of the craziness? Like, you almost have to try really, really hard to make it on the news nowadays.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you do.
That's true. Yeah.
Constantly breaking news. It's breaking my back. It's just. So now you also, I want to talk about you as well. So what are the things you've got going? I guess you have this. You're the founding member of a book pod.
Correct.
And so what's that?
Yeah. So it is a group of writers, professionals. We have editors. We have award-winning filmmaker. We have someone, the one Jen Brody, who she's the one that is the main founder of it. She is working with Disney on a series of books, and she's been in Forbes and all that stuff. And we have people from really all around the world as well. And an interesting range from, very literary to poets to action writers to and people writing screenplays. One of the writers for Grey's Anatomy is one of our members. So it's just a great range and a fantastic group, and we support each other. And then, hey, I have this contract for this work, and is the rate correct? And what do you think about this contract? Or do you have connections and helping to support each other? Because also, especially as you guys know, writing can be a very solitary endeavor, and to have a support group really kind of helps at times.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys have like cooked pizza and babies on pizza and all that stuff? Like, you guys one of those elite groups out of Hollywood? Is that sort of
Well, some do meet at times. It depends on the city and also the event, especially if someone has a book release or a certain event. Hey, they're going to have a reading here, and there's one of the members that does the drunken master, where you'll have people go to this event and these some not A-list actors, but people that you may have seen like on a TV show or something like that will go there and have some drinks and read excerpts from people's works, and it's a pretty humorous kind of thing and kind of a fun evening. People are involved with that. But then also it's mostly online because we're spread throughout. We even have a few people overseas. Most of them are in the LA area, but spread all over.
Yeah. Well, that's the primary place to be, right?
Yeah, you notice he didn't deny the eating babies.
Yeah, I know. He didn't even bring that up. They're honoring George Soros. Isn't that what the thing is?
Well, yeah.
Hillary Clinton's a special. She tells you use light barbecue sauce because you want to taste the meat, not the heat. Oh boy, I'll tell you, this world's just crazy. Well, now for you, do you have like a website or something that you want to give away, or people can come find you on, or do you stay hidden?
No, I have a website, MC Bland for Michael C. So mcbland.com, and there you can learn about me, my novel. And actually, I was recently awarded a finalist in 2 categories with the Indie Book Awards for both science fiction and thriller. So you get some sci-fi and a lot of, as well as, like I said, it's a fast-paced novel. Very proud of that. And you learn about me and also the time I pitched Columbia Pictures on one of my other stories. So it's a fun story. Let's check it out.
Yeah. MC Bland, that sounds like a rap.
It is, yeah. It's like MC Hammer, just without the parachute pants.
Well, maybe they're back in. You never know. You might have them.
I have a pair ready to go.
Bad. Now, so the price of safety. This would be, I think, a fascinating. I could see this being on Amazon Prime or Netflix as a series, even. Right? This would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love that. If you know anybody, let me know.
I know people, but none of them like me, so that wouldn't help. Well, I do my best. What we're going to do is we'll have your website, we'll have your book, we'll have all the information up on ours as well, so people can do one click if they're listening, and they'll find pictures and everything about everything they want, and pick up your book and do it all, and it's pretty exciting.
Sure.
And so you plan on doing this for quite a while, like doing more and more of the same, or are you going to stretch out and do some other types of writing, or where do you think?
Probably, at least for now, science fiction is there. That's my love, and so that's what's going to be my primary focus. But you never know. A story could strike me, or opportunity to work on a series or a movie or something like that. And absolutely.
Where did the story strike you? Were you really naked on a subway, or where does it does it come to you when you're sleeping?
True crime book in that right there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm actually I'm on the run. No.
Yeah.
It's weird. It comes to me at the weirdest times, and a lot of times when I'm walking, I'll would walk a lot, going places, and so that's really just where randomly out of the blue I'll start getting some idea, and a lot of times it's not a fully formed idea, but it's an interesting thing, and so then it might tie into another thought that I had, and so it starts to weave and grow, which is kind of actually what with this story. After the subway, that was just kind of the kernel, and then started to build from there.
That's where some of the best ideas come from. Observation.
Yeah, observation, and then someone will say something, and then someone else will, mention something else, and start to kind of grow.
Well, it sounds really good. We totally recommend it. We'll have it up, and thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This has been great.
Thank you.
To find out more about our show, guests, or to listen to past shows from our archive, please go to www.houseofmysteryradio.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.